We all are.
Okay, it seems like the broadcast has now started live. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining this breakout session. Strategies to improve housing affordability in Ventura County. All what we're all trying to do every day in our everyday lives, and just trying to make better housing choices and make a difference in our community. My name is Juliana Gallardo. I am a project manager with Many Mansions, and I will be moderating this session and dialogue along with Linda Fisher-Helton, who is also on. And thank you everyone who's joined today. Before we get started, I definitely would like to do some introductions just to see who is on. And whoever has camera and mic capacity, feel free to introduce yourselves.
I'm Nick Deitch. I'm with Main Street Architects, and been in Ventura County for close to 40 years. Just finished a session with Alex, and it was really fun, and I thought we shared some good information and got some great feedback from the participants. And this is a challenging situation, but I'm really pleased that you guys would include me in the opportunity for dialogue. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much. Rachel, do we want to start with you?
Of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Diaz. I'm with the California Housing Partnership, and part of the work that we do here at the partnership, or at least my team specifically, I help connect folks with sustainability and clean energy programs, specifically, I guess, connecting nonprofit affordable housing owners and operators.
Thank you, Rachel.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexander Russell. I'm the Executive Vice President at Many Mansions. As Nick mentioned, we had a great conversation earlier, and looking forward to have some additional dialogue.
Great.
Perfect.
Good morning or afternoon, everybody. My name is Emilio Ramirez. I am Director of Housing for the City of Oxnard. Fairly new still to the area, but I'm pretty happy to be here. Thank you, everybody.
Great.
Jackie, you want to go?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Jackie Pierce. I'm with the Westside Community Development Corporation over here on the Avenue, otherwise known as the Avenue, on the West Side. And you'll probably hear me say this in many other forums, occasions. I'm all about the West Side and things that are going on the Avenue. That's just my area. I'm interested in what's going on outside, but I'm pro Avenue over here and trying to meet the needs of the community. We're all about neighborhood revitalization, energy conservation, economic development opportunities, and just getting everybody engaged and connected. So it's been an exciting group today. So thank you.
Sounds good.
My name is Tim Gallagher, and Tim Gallagher, I get into trouble wherever I go with a lot of different projects, but I feel like I'm in the Mount Rushmore of Ventura County housing with all these people who are around here today. This is such a great group. The reason I'm here today is my colleague and I, Matt Feenup, have started a nonprofit community land trust in Ventura County to try to begin to ease the housing shortage. And I know, Juliana, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in depth later, so let me leave it right there for now.
Perfect. Nicole, do you want to introduce yourself? Oh, I feel like you're on mute. Okay. We can try back or check back in later with Nicole. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining. We have those folks who are joining and have video and speaking capabilities, but for others who are just listening in, feel free to, as we move this conversation along through the next hour, to put your questions in the Q&A sessions, and we'll do our very best to answer what you have. So back to, the whole intention of this breakout session was really to discuss strategies to improve housing affordability in Ventura County. And I know we can probably have, an endless day conversation on how we can achieve this. First we wanted to dive into talking about what we spoke earlier, about different innovations that we could do here in the county. And one of those innovative could be through land trusts, that we have seen proven models that work elsewhere in California, but also elsewhere in the United States. So we have Tim Gallagher here, who is going to do a little short presentation and dialogue about that. And then we'll hand over the mic to Rachel Diaz, who would like to do a presentation as well. So Tim, we'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Juliana. And the first thing I want to say is that we're a little bit later to the game than some of you guys have been working on this a long time, like Nick and Alex and Rick, the great people at Many Mansions, the folks at Habitat, Linda Braunschweiger, and the trust fund. They've been doing some great work. The genesis of our land trust came about 3 years ago when Matthew, who is an economist with Cal Lutheran, runs a Center for Economic Research and Forecasting, noticed some very troubling signs in Ventura County's economy. For one thing, our population was shrinking rather than growing, which is highly unusual. Our gross domestic product had actually flattened and gone down for a few years. So the value of all the goods and services that we produce in Ventura County was actually heading down, and yet home prices were heading up. Those figures are incongruent. They just don't make any sense. And what Matt concluded, which I can only explain to you in layman's terms, he's got the PhD, is that the housing shortage was actually the main driver for our dive in our economy. And so he and I and Ed Terry and Dan Hamilton and his group convened a group of what we called not the usual suspects. We got a housing solutions working group together. Some of the people on this call were there. Nick was there, Alex was there, Jackie joined us later. And these were folks who were affected by the housing shortage in one way or another. They may have had different philosophies on other issues. So for instance, we'd have labor unions in there with big businesses, but they disagreed about some of those issues, but they agreed that the housing shortage was hurting them. And so between the 60 or so of us who were there, we came up with 4 or 5 solutions. I won't go into the other ones today, but one of those was a community land trust, which is used in other communities around, I think, 225 or so around the country. Matt and I began to start one, hired a consultant, and Alex, I think the trust fund is doing one as well, right? They've started one. So we're going to have a couple of these in operation in the county with somewhat different purposes. Now, if you've never heard of a land trust fund, welcome to the club. 2 or 3 years ago, I had never either. It's sort of this complex legal entity that I'll just talk about the results for a minute. What it does in terms of housing is separates the cost of the home from the cost of the land. That's simple. Our trust owns the land on which we build Nick's house. Nick, we as the trust fund make a deal with a developer to build homes. Nick goes to the bank, gets a loan to buy the home, and then he makes a deal with us to lease the land. That effectively cuts the cost of housing in half. In Ventura County, where the average cost of an average house is over $600,000, we think this can cut it to about $300,000 or so. There are a lot of safeguards built into this to make sure that home stays affordable forever. We would only sell these houses to people who fit into certain medium income categories. And when they go to sell the house, they can only let the cost of that house rise by a certain amount. So that is how that's in a nutshell. There's 1,000 questions about it that we've been working on, but very close to the model that Habitat for Humanity uses. Alex, close to the one that the Housing Trust Fund is going to use, but it just hasn't been tried extensively in Ventura County. And Matt and I, who know enough about housing to fill a thimble, are in charge of getting this off the ground, but we're committed to it. That's the short overview.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tim, for that information. And I'm sure, as we grow and more folks start getting involved in this effort, I'm sure we'll, keep on building momentum on that. Any questions? I just wanted to remind folks, any questions that you have, please feel free to chime in on the Q&A or chat box to include your questions. So next on our guest speaker is, we have Rachel Diaz from CHPC. Rachel, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you for letting me have a chance to speak here today. I do have a few slides, so let me, hopefully, fingers crossed, that I'm able to share my screen. One moment. Oh, it says permission was denied by the system, but that's okay. We'll move away from the slides and I can just talk briefly about the work that CHPC does and some of the programs that we help to implement. So just an overview. I'm with the California Housing Partnership, and some of the work that we do here is really focused on connecting nonprofit affordable housing owners, operators, developers, anyone in that space, the nonprofit space, with access to clean energy or information and resources about clean energy programs and technologies. In addition, we do offer quite a bit of technical assistance services. So if any of you folks or your organizations, are interested in figuring out which programs might be viable, feel free to contact me. I'll drop some contact information in the slide there. But in addition to those technical assistance services that CHP offers, we do also help to implement 2 statewide clean energy programs. The first being something called the Low Income Weatherization Program, which is LIWIP for short. And we also help to implement the Solar on Multifamily Affordable Housing, or SOMA program, which I'll be dedicating my little spiel here today about that program specifically, but we do quite a bit of implementation work. And additionally, for folks who are in this industry and might be interested in sustainability, we also host something called the Green Rental Home Energy Efficiency Network. And what this is, it's called GREEN for short. But what this is, there's over 50 nonprofit housing organizations that are a part of this network, and we really, it's essentially peer-to-peer sharing. We discuss, clean energy technologies that are coming out, different regulations that are coming out as well. But it's definitely a great resource to get connected with other folks who are doing this work and are interested in this work. And a really exciting event that we're putting on through the Green Network is something called a Building Decarbonization Summit. And what this is, it's a summit that's spread over a series of 5 meetings. Every Monday, I think through mid-November, we'll be having these gatherings. And each gathering is focused on a key topic that's happening in the affordable housing industry as it intersects with sustainability. So I believe our next session will be focused on Title 24. Our past meeting this Monday was on the transition to all electric buildings and the pros and cons that come with that. But I will definitely, again, drop some information for folks if you're interested in, joining the network or participating in that summit. I think it's definitely a great opportunity to, connect with organizations and, again, focus on that peer-to-peer sharing. So before I jump into, I guess, what the SOMA program's about, I do want to really hit home on, why investments in clean energy programs and technologies can be beneficial for, affordable housing owners and operators. I think first and foremost, these investments can really help lower operating costs for your building. And depending on the programs that you do choose to participate or take advantage of, there are quite a bit of measures in there, or energy efficiency measures, that do benefit the common area portion of a building. And so not only does that increase your own cash flow, but at the same time, you definitely can help bring more benefits with energy efficiency measures to your tenants living there at the buildings as well. And in addition to, those financial benefits for both the owners and tenants, you are contributing to a healthy California. You're really helping to reduce those greenhouse gas emissions and help California meet the quite hefty energy goals that, we're moving towards there. And so I'll now jump into just a little bit more about what the SOMA program is. It's a pretty new program. We launched in July of last year. And essentially, the SOMA program it's a financial incentive program that is designed to significantly offset the cost of the installation of a solar PV system on a multifamily property. And so this program does operate statewide, and it operates in pretty much the 5 big IOUs, or the investor-owned utilities. So properties in the PG&E territory, SCE, San Diego Gas and Electric, and as well as Liberty and Pacific Core, the 2 little ones up north, can take advantage of this program. And through participation in SOMA, you're really getting some financial benefits there. And you're also increasing or creating a pathway for tenants of affordable housing properties to take advantage of solar. This is an opportunity, that folks don't have, they don't own these buildings. They might not, this is not a traditional pathway for them. So you're really setting up your residents and tenants for success through participation in our program. And a really cool aspect of SOMA that I think is cool, at least, is that in addition to the quite, I would say, generous financial incentives that we do offer owners with quite extensive free technical assistance services. So depending on, there's 2 tracks for our program, but essentially, if you do decide to take advantage of our more in-depth technical assistance, our program can, help you identify or create a solar feasibility report, assess your roof space, really make it easy to understand, the proper configurations for your property. And in addition to that, we help assess with financial modeling to see, maybe if ownership is the right approach for you, or, maybe present other options with, examples of solar leasing, and just to get an idea of, how much a system might even cost. So those are just a few examples of the support that we can provide owners. But another cool aspect of the technical assistance is that, we are a single program administrator. And so because of this, we can actually help owners co-leverage other energy programs in California. And so, we can have a conversation with an owner, kind of get an example of what needs need to be met at a property. And we can go ahead and make that connection for the owners. So for example, if you want to participate in SOMA, but you're also interested in in-unit upgrades, we can make that connection with the SCE program administrators of the ESA program, or the Energy Savings Assistance Program. So definitely our technical service or technical assistance is really designed to just make the process of participation in these programs as easy as possible. There is an application process, but at every step of the way, our program administrator team is just more than happy to help. Like, we're excited about getting owners connected with clean energy and sustainability efforts. And so that's just kind of a little bit of the background about SOMA, but I briefly just want to touch on some of or I guess how our incentives are actually designed and structured for the program. I think that's a quite important part of, participation in the program. So our SOMA incentives are actually, our rates are structured by the tenant area and the common area allocation. So for a program, at least 51% of the system that's being installed needs to directly benefit the tenants. But after that 51% threshold is met, an owner has the flexibility to, assign whatever portion of the system to the common area versus the tenant area. And our program is designed to 100% or fully offset the cost of the tenant portion of the system. So theoretically, let's say, you were interested in getting solar for your property, and you're interested in providing your tenants with direct benefits in the form of electricity bill credits. You could size your system or allocate your system 100% to the tenants, and your system through SOMA would be fully covered through our program. And so our goal is really just to maximize the incentive to, get the benefits of solar in the hands of the tenants. But definitely there's room for, different allocations for the common area to offset those costs as well. And right now, luckily, we have I think a little over 80 million in incentives for this program year for new projects in our pipeline, which is quite exciting. When our program first launched last year, we were immediately on a wait list and fully subscribed within the first day. So there's definitely no wait list for this year. So if folks, are themselves owners here or have connections with owners in your areas, feel free to send them my way. I can drop some links there to learn more about the program. But essentially, there's no wait list, and we really encourage folks to get their applications submitted as soon as possible, because once an application is submitted, you're actually locking in this year's incentive rates. It's important to note that every year moving forward, SOMA's incentive rates will drop by no more than 5%, and that's just to account for the solar becoming more easily accessible, and solar technology tends to, have a decrease in how much it costs every year. So definitely, even though there's funding available, I would still encourage applications to be submitted as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Overall, that's just a brief intro of the SOMA program. And if any of the folks here, are interested in learning more about, maybe SOMA or any of the other clean energy programs that are available in California, especially in Southern California, I'm more than happy to, sit down with you, schedule a meeting, look through some of your portfolios, or I'm even open to, figuring out how we can collaborate to get the message out there about these clean energy programs.
Perfect.
Real quickly,
Alex, you had a
I just
question?
wanted to mention, oh, no, I was just going to say, Many Mansions is using SOMA for one of our recently completed projects. So we're excited for that. One of the cool benefits that Rachel didn't mention is that the program actually offers job training for your residents, green job training. So that's something we're excited about. Obviously, green jobs are becoming more and more prevalent, and having residents gain those skills is just another great benefit. And the other thing, it should be mentioned, it's only for projects that are completed. It can't be used for new construction. So the project has to be completed before you can apply for SOMA. So just figured I'd mention that. So if you're doing a new construction, what we did is we made our project solar ready. So when the project was done, we can go back and apply for SOMA. So I think that's a good strategy. If you're doing a new construction, you want to add SOMA at a later date. Yeah, that's worked well for us.
Thank you for that piece there. And I did want to note that, yes, Alexander's totally correct. It is meant for existing buildings or retrofits, but as he mentioned, once, these new buildings are constructed and have a certificate of occupancy, they are considered eligible for SOMA. So his advice is definitely correct there.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rachel. So for anyone who wants to be a SOMA extraordinaire, please contact Rachel Diaz. Rachel, feel free to put your email information in the chat box so folks can reach out to you. So thank you so much for that, and for Alex for adding that information, that additional piece. So I've come up with a couple of questions for us to discuss in a roundtable manner in terms of how we can talk creative ways and creative strategies to improve housing affordability here in Ventura County. And I did send those questions out to everyone in the group, but I'm going to start off with this first question that I find the most interesting to me. And it has to do with land use and underutilized parcels, which Alex kind of highlighted earlier on in his presentation. So the question that I'm posing to the entire group is, with the lack of available land in the county, what are strategies to increase land availability? Can we create private and public partnerships with farmers, government? Pomegu has a plethora of land available, school districts to identify underutilized land, and how can we do that? So that's my first question to the group, and anyone can start off the conversation.
Okay. It's a great question, and it's a very open-ended question. There's multiple answers to that. You mentioned Point Magoo, but recently I've been doing some planning analysis for the Channel Islands Harbor, and it's kind of amazing because you go down to Victoria, and as soon as you cross Channel Islands Boulevard, you've got this harbor on one side, and you've got this vacant land covered with weeds on the other side that is the Port Hueneme base. And the base has need for housing, and a lot of their people live in our communities. And it just boggles my mind that we couldn't somehow cut a deal with the base to carve out, I don't know, maybe 20 acres of that property to build some affordable community that's right in proximity to the Channel Islands Harbor. It's just a little nugget that's hanging there, and it's probably buried under layers and layers of bureaucracy and land use limitation. And I think honestly, the only way that it could happen would be through some kind of coalition from the community approaching the base to say, "Hey guys, you need housing, we need housing. There is this amazing resource, and it's smack right up against the boundary of urbanized stuff. Can we do something?" So there are pieces like that throughout the county that we see that, and Alex did a good job of sharing some of that this morning. The other piece I will throw out there is that, and which again we talked about this morning, is the idea that our zoning codes are so limiting in terms of land use. And if we were to, along the corridors where we have transit already serving, if we were to simply get communities to retool their zoning to allow for even car-free development in certain locations, they don't have to mandate it. All they have to do is open up the zoning to allow it. And watch what happens.
I'd love to hear from Shauna on what just happened in Moore Park on High Street, where something I think kind of amazing has happened in a community. Shauna, you want to talk about that for those not familiar with it?
Sure. So I'm new to the city of Moore Park, so if I am novice at all, just let me know. But in the city of Moore Park, we have an older downtown that's very highly underutilized. There's many vacancies. There's uses that probably shouldn't be in a downtown, and there's properties that are just plain out vacant. The city in the past, over the last 20 years, has worked to acquire property along the downtown and work with developers. And finally, a project has come through that was approved on High Street. It's either High Street Depot or High Street Station, depending on who you talk to. But effectively, it'll be a multi-use property, which will have commercial primarily on the ground floor, and then multifamily rental above. And so this is a big deal for Moore Park because it's one of the more dense properties that we've permitted and opened up the conversation about what density looks like in a functional downtown that effectively isn't functional right now. And there's been a lot of support for it, although there's a little bit of opposition. I would say the opposition is coming from folks that are historically in that area and not necessarily as a whole. But I think it's very innovative of the community and the city to look at how you can overlay a specific plan for the area, look at density, look at the connection to transit because we have the train station there. And it's really underutilized. I mean, the train station parking lot's empty most of the time. I know folks that drive in from surrounding communities that would love to live here and commute to LA to work. And so it'll be really interesting to see once this is built, how this could transform our downtown and maybe be modeled in some of the other downtowns that aren't functioning as well.
It's a great project.
And you had very little, as I remember, you had very little neighborhood opposition, right?
Correct. I would say that there's probably one or two particular folks that are in opposition. And they've been in opposition based on some perspectives of parking. We did a neighborhood analysis of parking, which shows that for the most part, only about 40% of the parking is ever used, even on a peak day. And that's on an event day where everything's going on. So there's 60% of the parking that's not being used. So they were able to leverage that in the development approval to make sure that they didn't need to provide additional parking and make some concessions for parking. But I think it's one way that they had to think creatively about it, do the research to be able to back it up, because that's where the opposition is coming from. But I think that'll fall flat.
Great.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mentioned several things already in my earlier session. I definitely hope that either the state or locally we can pass some sort of zoning to allow residential and church-owned property. I do feel like that's an underutilized resource throughout Ventura County, as I mentioned. More residential and commercial, as I mentioned. Oxnard does an amazing job. In my opinion, it's the most progressive zoning code in the county.
I agree.
With their downtown and with the AHOP zone and with the residential and commercial. They have a lot of great things, and there's some really exciting affordable housing projects being done by Many Mansions and Habitat and People Self-Help and Cabrillo and others. So there's a lot going on there. And thanks to Emilio and his team, they've been great partners and really understand what it takes to build affordable housing. So I definitely want to give Emilio a shout out because he has a great team there. We mentioned the school district property again. The unfortunate reality here in Ventura County is we have declining enrollment in most of our schools. I know several schools have actually closed over the last many years, and there's underutilized bus storage areas and just parts of schools that could be repurposed. So if we can, no one wants to close a school. I'm not advocating for that, but I think that land could be used more efficiently. And yeah, I think those are kind of some of the big things, the kind of low-hanging fruit that would not significantly change the character of our communities. But infill is the key. If we don't do infill development, we're going to continue to spread out into our farmland, into our hillsides, and no one really wants that. So we have to look at using the land we have better. Nick gave some great examples of parcels that, and then I also mentioned kind of the small parcels, like how do we link them together? How do we get creative? I thought the tiny homes project Habitat was doing was great. And I've been hearing tiny homes forever, so it's great to see that moving forward. So I think there's some exciting things happening. The main thing is just for us to continue to work together and to advocate, for that change.
Nicole, did you have anything to add? Oh,
We can't hear you.
You're still on mute. You can try to do it in your chat box. Jackie, do you have any insight as to what's going on the west side in terms of what's going on in terms of housing? And I know there's a lot of happening with the Ventura Housing Authority, and do you have any insight as to that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, we are very excited what the Housing Authority has been doing, and a recent purchase of a blighted piece of property, and just the overtaking of that and what that does for the community. Kind of lifts not only addresses the housing topic, but also just the kind of the morale and emphasis on how people are living, because that one piece of property was not well managed at all, and people are living in subpar conditions. We've equally been trying to do our part in highlighting available parcels for homes before investors get to them. That's kind of our biggest concern. I know that my colleague Tracy Hudak brought that up in one of the chats of how do we get innovative with addressing gentrification. So the avenue has been known as an area for starter homes for people, or investment pieces of property as rentals, and we're just trying to house our people here and become first-time home buyers, and it's a challenge. There's a lot of competition. Everybody's fighting over the same little piece of property. It's not very big, and so a starting home is way overpriced for individuals that are just trying to get in the game. And so we're partnering with VCCDC, as many of you are as well. We're trying to wave our hand to people self-help, Habitat for Humanity. In fact, I'm looking at a couple pieces of property after this meeting with a realtor and Habitat, just scope out areas before they're snatched up. And I would love to know how to address that. So when we're talking about infill or any property, how do we get that in the hands of the people that are here before they get in the hands, and no offense to any outsiders, but just trying to get people in the game, make it equitable. Yeah.
Definitely. A lot of, millennials, people my age, or, who are trying to, buy their first home, are being outpriced because, the market is just so expensive. And, you have all these outside investors coming in that can just like buy them up cash, and, just doesn't allow for, locals to really invest in home ownership opportunities. So, I'm sure there has to be some way for us to increase the supply, because that's what ultimately we need. And I'm sure there's.
Could I ask Nick a question about that?
We're doing the best that we can to increase housing demand.
So can I ask Nick a question about that? Because he's such a creative guy. So Nick, one of the one of the candidates I saw reading an interview with her for the Thousand Oaks City Council, she was talking about with COVID, after COVID, there'll be a lot of commercial office space where you used to have hundreds of people working that probably isn't going to be used that way anymore. Maybe, 100 or 75 of those people are going to come back to work. What are the challenges in converting office space into, condos or townhomes or apartments?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's really, Alex and I, again, we were talking about this this morning, I believe. We're in the midst of a transformation. Times like this don't happen every day, thank goodness. We don't know what the outcome of this COVID situation is, but on a certain level, we're all learning a lot, and we're suddenly seeing what a shift would look like if we didn't have to get into a car every day, or if we didn't have to work in an office building with 150 other people. The challenge, though, is that office buildings are not designed as habitable living space. They tend to be very deep. And that depth is what makes the housing more difficult. Because everybody, in a home, you want fresh air, you want light. The building codes require access for exiting and things like that. So office buildings are not, readily transferable to residential use.
Okay.
So I expect over time we'll see some serious redevelopment of properties, especially some of the strip commercial centers that people are discovering other ways to shop as well. So it's an interesting question, and I think we're still in the steep learning curve right now, and until we get out from the other side of this thing and look back, we're not really going to know which changes will stick with us. But it's fascinating. I wanted to, if I could, respond to Jackie's points and concerns about the West Side. It's such an interesting area. The West Side, and I assume most of you are familiar with it, is an kind of an isolated little community of its own. It's sandwiched between the Ventura River and the hills, and sort of sneaks around and touches the downtown area. And it's really, most of it developed between 1920 and 1930 in response to the discovery of oil in that area. And so it essentially became an oil town that almost functioned autonomously for many years. And so they have this very interesting mix of hardcore industrial, light industrial, service industrial, a little bit of commercial. The length of Ventura Avenue, it's a long spine and it's tight. And so how does a place like that evolve and grow? And frankly, I think it's one of the most wonderful communities in Ventura County. Yeah. And there's a lot of desire there for it to evolve, but there's clearly not agreement on how it should evolve. I think it's worthy of its own plan. I think that the city should invest money in helping the West Side create a real plan. Been working on it for 25 years and still don't have a real solid plan. One of the challenges you've got, which is just like the challenges that we're faced in Moore Park, is the fear of change and the fear of density. And that's just going to take some dialogue and some sharing and showing people what it can look like and how it could work. Interestingly, the school district owns one of the key pieces of property there that is right now probably 80% parking and lawn, and has a tremendous potential to be a catalytic infill project, and other sites around that area. So there's so much opportunity, Jackie. It's just bursting with opportunity.
Yeah. We talked a lot about Oxnard so far, but Emilio, you haven't said anything. You guys are the kings over there, man.
I was kind of waiting for my turn. Let's see. First of all, I totally agree with what Alex says regarding infill. I think infill and dense infill development is the key. I think in every corridor, everywhere there's a restaurant, there should be a housing on top of it. Mm-hmm. Every business where there's a single-story business, there should be housing on top of it. downtown, along the corridor, everything. There are some areas in Oxnard that just suffer from disinvestment. Wainimi Road near the Many Mansions project is sad. I think it could use some work and mixed use, etc. I think, and second, I also agree with Alex relative to building housing on church-owned properties. Alex, I actually have a sample ordinance, if you'd like to help me push it, that posits that developing permanent supportive housing on church-owned properties are consistent with their mission and therefore by right. I can send that to you, and we can lobby for it if you can help.
That'd be great.
I've tried to do that in a church in town, and we're getting closer down in conversation, but it needs a little bit of politics. I also think that we need to work a little bit on attacking the affordability from the income side. I think that Oxnard suffers from a particular issue, which is, the cost of housing in Oxnard is similar to the rest of the area, still a beach area, still, et cetera, still in California. Yet the income here is so low comparatively. And I think that we need to work on developing wages and kind of try to close the gap from that income perspective. I would love a living wage ordinance. I would love something along those lines that allows us to kind of fill that need that is more global than I think just the actual cost of housing, but also allows us to pay for the rent that is going to garner. Because I don't know necessarily that the housing authority or the city or the nonprofit developer can continue to try to chase the market when you just don't have the money for it. So.
We had a discussion a couple of weeks ago with one of the former sheriff's deputies who worked out of that East County substation on Olson Road, and they've actually converted a room there that they call the Palmdale room, because the officers, our deputies who are, our first line law enforcement in this community, can't afford to live here. They live in Palmdale. If they get off work too late, rather than drive out to Palmdale and drive back, they sleep in this converted bunk in there just so they can be here to protect us. You think about that for teachers and for, first responders. That's, these are people who are supposedly held in the highest regard in our community, and they don't make enough money to afford houses here.
It's honestly unacceptable. I had a conversation with a fairly large and famous single family large developer, which I won't name, which was not in Oxnard. And they're telling me that they have started to, they continue to build these, 3,000 square foot houses, but that they changed their marketing campaign in order to market it to two families to buy one house and move into the same house, instead of figuring out a different way to build two houses of 1,000 square feet or 1,100 square feet so they can live in their own house. They're going to still sell this $1 million house and market it to two families, brother and sister with their own family. It made me cry.
Yeah, absolutely.
That does touch on a really interesting realm, though, Emilio. The idea of multi-generational houses and what those could look like. I've heard it talked about a little bit. I was in a Latino New Urbanism conference a decade ago, and it was talked about. I haven't seen any developers, maybe they are out there, but I haven't seen them, not in Ventura County, proposing, multi-generational homes. And I wonder if our zoning codes are also, getting in the way. Could we take some of our, we wonder about existing single family neighborhoods, and could they evolve?
Yeah.
And certainly the state has passed some ordinances that allow for the granny flat and that sort of thing. But this is something a little bit different, designing a home that or that is maybe a courtyard style house that has some separate dwelling in it, but is intended for multi-generational. This is
I think
something that I think we're going to see
I think
more
it
and
would
more
be great if it was, I think it would be great if it was intentionally designed that way and made it happen that way, as opposed to kind of forcing it in. There is legislation that's coming in that would kind of make a duplex by right on a single family zone.
Right.
And so, that's things like that I think are possible.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think what Alex said earlier, which is infill, dense infill.
Yep.
Yeah, but I think if you do that, let's be realistic. That we have all been to county or city hearings that go on until late hours of the night with people opposing even the most simple infill projects. And I don't know, from Emilio, from you, and from Sean, I mean, if we don't change these things locally, I think the momentum keeps building in Sacramento to just take local decisions away. And, you hear people crying about it all the time who run city councils, planning commissions, say, local decisions are the most important. But if you don't make the right ones and you don't build enough for your community, then you're going to lose it. I mean, I'm interested to hear how you guys react to that.
Well, I mean, I think
And do it right like Shauna did it. Design it right, celebrate it when it works, and do it again.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Oxnard too, Emilio. I mean, you guys have done a lot of good stuff there.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is I think the biggest challenge we have here locally is we don't have enough broad-based ordinances. When you try to come in and do a general plan amendment or a zone change or some upzoning on a specific site, you're always going to get opposition, always.
Right.
But when you have a downtown code or you have a progressive code, like in Moore Park, or specific plans, that makes the process so much easier and more certain for developers. I mean, risk is always the biggest issue. If you know coming in, you're up for a fight, you're not going to do it. Like, I mean, I can't speak for other developers, but many mansions' appetite for general plan amendment and zone changes is pretty much zero. We've gone through it. It's always tough. It's tough on the council. It's tough on us. It's expensive, and we just won't do it. So that's why we were so excited when you have this progressive type code in Oxnard. We're not done through the process. We're still going through entitlements and everything else, but we've had good community outreach. We've had good community feedback. It's well thought out, and we've had much less opposition for an 87 unit project on a 0.4 acres than we've had for a 27 unit project on 2 acres in other jurisdictions.
Right.
Right. I'm not going to say the other jurisdictions, but you just have to have broader based codes. That's why I say having all Ventura County cities allow residential and commercial, or have by right affordable housing on church-owned land, or those types of things. When you have a broad-based initiative, it's much easier to get things approved. And I think that's where we can't just do the spot infill. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, and
I also think there are
the community. The spot infill is okay, but in the end, you want things to fit together like a well-designed puzzle. And so it really requires the cities and the jurisdictions to take the leadership in it. We can't do it from the outside. It doesn't work.
Nick, I would throw one thing on that. I mean, if this session is about strategies, you'll remember, because I think you were there, and Alex, I think you guys sent Doug that night. But when Thousand Oaks was rezoning all that area to add 1,100 homes to their bank, they had the 12 or 14 NIMBYs who come out to every meeting opposing it. And Matthew and I and the others who were in that Housing Solutions Working Group brought out 25 people from all across the county, and the council went with us 4-1. Yeah. And they talked about the overwhelming support. So if we're talking about strategies in this section, I don't think it takes more than 25 or 30 of us who care about these solutions to show up at these council meetings. Like, I was advocating for the one in Ventura a couple of weeks back. And, I live in Simi Valley. I got no dog in that fight, except to talk about being, from Homes for Generations. And that is, I think, what needs to happen, because the NIMBYs will always win if they divide us. And there's my strategy 2 cents. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that there are so many examples of successful projects that, there's never a loss for it. There's a mixed-use public library with public housing in San Diego that is so nice.
Awesome.
There's so many examples out there that we can just feature.
Yeah.
To your point, Tim, I think it goes back to what I mentioned earlier too about having a stronger advocacy groups. I feel like we have like 30 or 40 different housing groups and nonprofits here in Ventura County, all piecemeal trying to do the same thing. Home has kind of tried to fill that void, but
Yeah.
I know could do a better job. We don't really have this centralized advocacy group. I'm on the board of directors of SCAMP, the Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing, and so is Nicole. And they do a lot of great legislative work. Unfortunately, most of it's in LA, but we need to have more cohesion here in Ventura County. And that's why I think the Residents United Network and some sort of stronger coalition between our groups. It shouldn't be Jackie just advocating on the boulevard, like you said, Tim. It should be all of us.
Yep.
When a project in one community needs help, we should be writing letters of support and coming out. And because you're right, I had a project where we had 6 or 7 really strong NIMBYs, and they just killed the project, even though there's a lot of other support, because they just doggedly showed up to every council meeting, even when the project wasn't on the docket, just to voice their opposition. And you actually were part of it, Tim. You remember the negotiations on the project I'm talking about.
I do. Yep.
80 units of senior housing in a jurisdiction, which
and we even had a nun on our side, Alex, as I remember. How do you go against a nun, right?
We do have a nun on our board.
Right. But I mean, if I looked at, and I'm not, Juliana, I'm not blowing smoke at you and Karen, the other people who organized this conference, but when I looked at all those names, I mean, that's a mailing list for us to start from. That was a ton of good names on that group that could come out and support some of these projects, because Emilio's right. There are a lot of good ideas out there. We just can't see. We have so many people in the development community who are unwilling to take the risk because of so much with opposition. And frankly, sometimes not Oxnard or Moorpark, but sometimes cities are pretty slow at moving these projects through the pipeline. No offense, guys. No offense.
And I think one of the things that we're looking at too as a major opposition to housing in general is that our code currently is set up to be a hurdle. It's not streamlined, it's not fast, it's confusing, and it frankly just makes it hard and expensive to develop here. So one of our goals with our general plan update that we're going through right now is basically to strip it down and create a logical path for any developer, be it affordable or not, to get through our process in a streamlined, understandable process. Now, that may be counterintuitive to a lot of kind of old school planning ideas, which is lock it down, create rules, and follow through. But you have to think holistically. That's not working. And it hasn't worked for years, obviously, because we're only getting one kind of housing here in Moorpark. In certain places, you're only getting certain types of housing. So I think we have to look at it holistically. And I agree with Tim and everyone mentioning that we need to have better advocacy, because I'm part of a couple of little advocacy groups, both on housing and environmental, and they oppose each other.
Yeah.
But me personally, I think that those things go hand in hand. We need to look at how we protect open space. We need to look at how we divide up land and find our priorities, and then push the projects that are in the right spot. I spoke on the one for Ventura recently that's down near the pier, and the opposition for it, I think even their opposition is falling apart. And if we all come out and we have our logical backgrounds that support these projects, I think it'll go through. But we don't have a cohesive way of communicating together.
Yeah.
I was going to mention that project. The Front Street project was appealed. It had it had design review and planning commission approval, and was appealed by two community members. It had a lot of community opposition, but I was blown away by the number of people who showed up in favor of it. And I'll tell you, that's very heartening. So often we are the bad guys in these meetings. We are the evil architects and affordable housing developers, and to have the community there in vocal support, and especially there were young people there who were talking about their future Ventura, not the old guard future Ventura. That was amazing. And so
I think it's changing, Nick. I mean, those of us who have been involved in this for years, it's changing. The tide's definitely moving towards more acceptance of these projects.
I do think that, number one, it does work. And I think that the council kind of appreciate the ability to make that kind of a decision. I can tell you when I took our navigation center, our proposed downtown project, which is a 56-unit permanent supportive housing mixed use with a shelter, there was the regular crowd of NIMBYisms that showed up, but There was an additional 30 or so people, thanks to Alex's help and the faith-based community and et cetera, that said, I like this idea.
Yeah.
It was just easy for the council to make a decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they actually feel like
So we
champions.
have,
You know.
so we have 5 minutes left in our session, and I really just want to summarize really what we've been gathering in terms of what is the common theme. And it sounds like we really need to build together and really build a cohesive, a civic engagement type of partnership to really bind all of us together to advocate for affordable housing and to take those folks to city council when a new project comes forward. So I think what I'm going to take back to the home board is really to really look at establishing and building that network of the VC Residents United Network, and really talk about how we can build that coalition so that we could outnumber those NIMBYisms. And because I know there's so many of us who believe in this work and believe in the need of affordable housing, and there's no reason why projects shouldn't be stopped because of 4 people who constantly show up at city council meetings to stop projects. So I think for myself, I'm going to take this back to the home board and really build on that. So anyone else have any closing remarks before the time is up?
It's been great.
I just want to say that Jackie Irwin, our Assemblywoman, has been so great on so many projects that I've worked on. And I know Alex, she's been helpful to many mansions and to Habitat and others. You know, we should rely on them too, because she in particular has done a terrific job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for everyone for your participation. I know that we do very difficult work, and sometimes it could be draining and hard, but I know that at the end of the day, we're just always very proud when we see our projects come on the pipeline and we see families moving in, and that's when we know we've had impact in our local community. So thank you again for joining in on this conversation, and I'm sure we'll keep on talking on how to build civic engagement in our community to just really drive all of our projects forward. So thank you again, everyone, and I believe we'll have to go back to the main stage. So thank you, everyone, for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Juliana.
Thank you for being here.
All right.